everyone. This is the channel AgileSeeker, and we're here speaking with interesting people about interesting stuff. And today my guest is Nigel Baker, a worldwide reputable Agile Coach, Scrum Master, and a plenty amount of bunch of regalies that I saw in your LinkedIn profile. It will take, I guess, more than 10 minutes for me just to read the amount of stuff that you do. So it's very big honor for me to host you on my channel, and I do hope we will have a very productive talk. So welcome to the channel, Nigel. In few words, as a starting part, maybe you will describe how you start on this, how you are in Agile, something like this.
This is quite interesting for me because I've been in this a long time. So I've been in Agile not nearly 20 years. It's getting close to 20 years. And over the years, 20 years is a long time, right? And things get buried under the sand. And so for years, I've told stories about my sort of beginning in Agile. And it's only a couple of years ago, I had to start looking back and going, hang on a minute, what actually legend and what actually happened, and sort of look at it a bit from distance. So the short version of the story is I was a software developer, and I still at heart regard myself as a software developer. You know, I started off as a child. My father was into computing in the late 70s, had like Commodore PETs and Apple IIs really in the late 70s, early 80s for work. And I love them. So I got really into them. So I've always been around computers my entire life. So it was always a natural step. When I was going to go to university, I was going to study computing. And when I was going to leave university, I was going to work somewhere in the computing world. That was always my path. I kind of dreamt of being a software developer. You know, as a young boy playing computer games, you always dream of writing the next game. But I ended up working in a big company, a big conglomerate, a telephone company called British Telecom as a software developer, and very happy doing it, right? Anyway, what happened was this. So we are in a team, a tactical team. So in this big company, it's so big, it's so, at the time, slow, so slow. So we had a team where we worked, where we were delivering tactical applications. So our job was, yeah, it'll take 3 years to get your system built, but we'll do one in 6 weeks to cover the gap. And of course, the gap never went away. Those systems ran for 20 years when they should have run for 20 weeks, right? So anyway, we get a project, a nice, juicy project in. Someone else can't do it, we're going to do it. We start working on it, and then famously, we get into a bit of trouble, right? It's a bit bigger than we're used to handling. There's a bit over-designed. It starts faltering a bit. The project manager gets into a bit of trouble. And so my boss, who's now a famous Agile author, Jeff Watts, comes in and says that we need to change things up. One of the team, another guy who's out there at the moment, John McNeil, had been on one of the first Scrum courses in Europe, right? One of the first, I think the second ever European course, probably the top dozen ever Scrum trainings on earth, right? And he went to it and he came back saying, hey, this Scrum thing's a really good idea. We should try it. Now, I will admit, I seem to remember at the time, everyone saying that Scrum was very popular and very big in America and Scandinavia, and thus we should be doing it. So it wasn't like a big challenge. It was like, oh, here's a new thing. Yeah, everyone else is doing it. Finally, we're catching up. You have to remember, this was around 2002, 2003. So no one was doing it. We just didn't know. And it turns out ignorance is a great shield. If you don't know it's not possible, all things are possible. So we start doing Scrum. Great. Having a great time. We're looking really good. We're building great stuff that we've never built before. We look amazing. Push comes to shove. My boss, once Jeff moves on, does something else, they say to me, Nigel, do you want to be Scrum Master? And I went, is it more money? I can't remember if it was or not, but I took the role anyway. And that's how I sort of took my first steps, as first as a developer, then as a Scrum Master for that company. Then I became an Agile coach for that company, sort of traveling around for a couple of years, helping their teams. And then around 13 years ago, I set up on my own, went off and set up my own company, AgileBear. And it's been running for like 13 years since. So I've been basically coaching around the world, training, a lot of training around the world, and sort of consultancy, helping all different shaped companies. I will admit, I have finally got to work with computer games companies and that's been great. They're very different to each other, but incredibly enthralling, incredibly exciting. I've worked with game consoles, which was great, but a lot of it has been what I would call middle of the road things, grey things in grey companies, but with lovely people. And so for me, I've really enjoyed that journey. There's been a lot of travel, a lot of work, but I've really enjoyed being able to visit these places, share my learning, and learn from them. I find that, well, my nearly 20 years in, I'm still learning every day. And I probably know less now than I did at the start. You know, at the start, you think you know everything. Turns out everything's a really big word, right? And so over those years, I've learned more, I've experienced more, and I felt I've added value and also had value added to me. And that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I think this was an incredible journey, I do believe. I mean, the last 20 years. So keeping in mind that like officially manifesto for Agile Manifesto was in 2001. But here, what's the interesting question arise from myself? So you started as a developer. I mean, how we can describe developers as people who are like mathematical state of mind with this which combination of mathematical and creative state of mind. And usually what I see when I conduct trainings for the developers is that they are usually not saying resistant to Scrum, resistant to Agile, but more like a more pragmatic way. Yeah, Agile requires a little bit more creativity, more let's call it soft skills, and this is actually what programmers, developers not lacking, but not the most developed part from them. Yeah. So as a developer, transforming from a developer to a Scrum Master, which is, I do believe, in my personal, that is like the most important is the empathy or understanding, listening people, share with their thoughts. How was this transition? Was it difficult for you to go from this, let's call it pragmatic, mathematical way of thinking to a more like open-minded, open-minded person?
Yeah, it's interesting. So for me, I was a bit cynical about Scrum when it was first introduced. I will be honest, very cynical person. But I always thought, it's only when it actually worked and I saw it working did I get bought into it. So having it explained to me, having it shown to me was all one thing and it's nice. But when we actually started doing it and it started working, that's when I started sort of buying into it as an experience. Now, for me, I was quite lucky because in our previous tactical arm, we were quite self-organizing anyway. Like I was officially a software development manager was my job title. So I did software development, but also I had to manage the delivery myself. There was no one above me to manage it. I had to look after itself. I had to do all the emailing. I had to communicate with stakeholders. So I had quite a lot of those skill sets already. I felt quite cross-functional. I wasn't like a little just solely focused on one thing. So moving to Scrum and being more self-organizing didn't feel painful. I do remember keep asking Jeff, my Scrum Master, so what should I do next? And Jeff would say, what do you think? And I would say, well, what do you think? Because I was waiting for him to give me an answer. So that I found a little bit more difficult. But for me, what I realized was I've always been one of those people, a bit of a sort of a, we say Agile is like an art science fusion, sort of you get maths and logic, you cross it between improv comedy and you stick the two together and you get sort of an Agile experience. So I've always had that side to me, but just not in work. Or in work, but not on the work. So I'll be the cheeky guy making jokes in work, but the work was very serious. And sort of what I found was, I found that art side coming through and being very attractive, and I didn't know I liked it. So beforehand, I would have said, no, I'm happy at my desk doing my thing. And when I had that opportunity to be creative, to speak to people, to share my ideas, that became very rich for me. That sort of human side of it that I seemed to not have before. It was an untapped resource, I would say, that I always knew was in me, but I'd never thought about in a workplace setting. So sort of soft skills sort of came up. So I didn't come from a very sort of narrow background. I came from a slightly broader background, which really, really helped me. Really, really helped me indeed.
Yeah, thanks. So also one more one more problem, or let's call it like this, a complicated myth about developer Scrum Master relationship is about that many people confuse about the Scrum Master responsibilities and do consider them as more like managers. I mean, like a management position, who is like an intermediate layer between developers and management. So how was your colleagues? Then I do believe that you said that you become a Scrum Master in the same company that you was a developer. So you had to work with people with whom you were also a team member as a developer. How your colleagues reacted to your new position? And I do believe that you said that the Scrum was new for all of you. I mean, in different circumstances. How they reacted in your new role, let's call it like that. If there was some issues or some challenges that you can mention about understanding the new role?
Again, this is really interesting, actually, because when Jeff came in as the first Scrum Master, he was our boss. He was the manager of the department. So there was an area of authority, but also an area of management. Now, actually, he managed in quite a positive way, so it wasn't too bad. But when I came in, it very much was as a peer of the team doing this role. I don't think anyone felt me like the boss at all. I don't think they did. I think it was offered to a couple of people before me who turned it down, interestingly. So they kind of went, no thanks, no thanks. And so it came to me, if I remember correctly. So it was quite peer, it was quite a peer environment, which was really, again, really powerful place for it to start. I think the issue you're describing is really harsh in many organizations. A lot of Scrum is done to people rather than done by people. So it's sort of imposed, whether it's Scrum Master as a manager sort of imposing or the method is imposed. And that does make it unpopular with people. It doesn't matter what you're imposing. You could be imposing free drinks. If you force someone, they will not be happy. And so there's always got to be an appetite for this sort of stuff. And so I think for me, too many organizations, they think, oh, this is a good thing. You will like it once you do it. And they don't actually think about the journey in, the explanation, the why to teams, and helping them understand why they would do this, why it's a good thing. And I think generally that's how Scrum Masters should work. I know in Greenleaf servant leadership, which is drawn from heavily in Scrum Mastery, they talk about sort of three ways of power. Power by, I think, coercion, which is sort of like do it or you're fired, or do it, you get a bonus. Power, I think, by control or something. But the idea is I'm your boss, you will do as I say. But the third one's power by persuasion. So explain to people, explain why something's a good idea. And I think that's the most powerful way to work as a Scrum Master. Everyone's your peer, whether they're the most senior boss or the most junior developer. Everyone's your equal. Talk to them as an equal. Persuade, explain, and people will buy into it. People will realize you're not the interface between you and management. You are an enabler. They'll realize you're here for them. You're not here for them. And I think that's quite a powerful thing to do.
This is, I guess, the biggest issue that people just usually in many organizations that I saw it as like initially this toxic environment that when I was like the general question was, okay, you have a Scrum Master. What's his main duties? What is he doing? Can he start? And the person started to talk me from citing the Scrum guide, and I was saying, no. What are you doing? Not what should be my guide. What? Just describe me your daily basis. How you start your days. And like after 3 or 4 phrases, I was saying, okay, you are not doing Scrum Master, but rather you are just managing the team. You are like more traditional, maybe more hierarchic way managing the team. You're just changing the title. You're not changing the essence of the way it works. So it's not the Scrum. So I think this is a perfect example actually for this. You mentioned servant leadership, and I had the honor last year to have participating in Agile Online Summit with Jeff Watts about servant leadership. And we were discussing this issue, which we have currently in our country, where is born a natural type of leadership in Armenia. I mean, more hierarchical. So the guy on the top is usually ruling everything and is usually in the teams also. And gradually, currently, what is happening in the team, in the companies who are adopting Agile, adopting correct Scrum, is you're like gradually transforming to a more correct way, about the people then can really lead people, not to manage them. And this is, I think, the best essence of the Scrum, how it should be done. Unfortunately, it's a slow process. So, but I think it's going further. You mentioned that you were working in a British telecommunication company. So you started as a software developer, then you were a project manager, Scrum master, and so on. But then you moved. I mean, what was the key differences that you can describe working in a gigantic corporation where all are like part of something bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have a lot of experience working with different people, teaching a lot of stuff, and general, let's call it general comparison, big corporations versus small companies. What is better and why? More important for agile transformation.
Yeah, here's interesting. So owning AgileBear has been very powerful. Over the years, we've had up and down amount of people working with us or for us or together. I do miss from British Telecom being part of a coaching team. So there was up to a dozen coaches in a team at one point in British Telecom, and that was great. Now, some of those coaches I didn't rate at all. Some of them were great, right? But having a team was very powerful. You felt the energy from them, you felt the network, you felt the support. As an outside company, you feel that a lot less, right? As the owner, you feel it a lot less. So that's always been the painful side, being small, like outside consultancy compared to internal big supportive team. But the good news is in small companies, and agile small companies, AgileBear, but also companies we work with, they have to be naturally agile or they're doomed. If you don't focus on value, you're dead. If you don't focus on change, you're dead. It doesn't make a difference. The life's too harsh to let those companies survive in any sort of model that isn't, it doesn't have to be called agile, but it's that shape, small, empowered team, working closely with the business, supported and enabled, delivering value frequently. So it has to be in that shape, else it doesn't work. The big downside for me was when I came out of British Telecom, I was one of the few people who had enterprise experience of agile, because there were so few companies doing agile at scale, like big corporation agile. And so I think when I left, I looked to see if I wanted to set up my own company or get a job. So I went on the job engines, typed in Agile Coach, and there was one job in the UK for Agile Coach. And I knew who had put it out there, Colin Bird of Ripple Rock these days. It was Conchango back then. It was he who put the job out, right? So I knew who had done it. And now if you type Agile Coach into a job engine, there's millions of coaches, right? But like for me, what I find is being a coach, working with a company of my size, with a big company, because that's what we got hired to do by these big companies. They wanted, hey, we want some of that BT magic, whatever, was great. But it meant you always saw the dark side of the Scrum, because those big companies often weren't in a good shape and weren't in a good shape agile-wise. And so there's lots of good work, lots of exciting stuff, lots of work to do, but it was always kind of like, wouldn't it be nice to see a nice one? Wouldn't it be nice to see like a company that's really, really cutting edge and really doing well here? Over the years, I see more and more of those companies. So I am quite optimistic. You described what it's like in Armenia with leadership. It's like that everywhere, to be honest. It's not been any different anywhere else. But what's happened is the world's changing. I heard someone say it may be old leaders are physically dying off, like they're actually physically going, but new people are coming through. And today, things are in a far better space than when they were like 15 years ago when AgileBear started.
Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the cases actually where I think that modern agile coaches, agile leaders should be responsible for, because we are responsible for the leaders who will be in future, for the tomorrow. This is one of the cases where the sharing and teaching and coaching people in proper way is very, very essential. I think also for the big corporations, from my experience also, is that big corporations, even without agile, they produce certain results, but they are not satisfied with that result. But at least there is some result.
Yeah.
So in that case, they're much more
Yeah.
easier for them to underline that, you know, Agile is not working for us, than to try something to go outside of the box, you know. And I hear this a lot. I mean, people are saying, yeah, you know, we tried Agile, it doesn't work for us because we have a very complicated structure, we have very difficult work, and the specifics of our job is not applicable to Agile. And then you start digging up and try to understand what is the specifics. Then you say, and you see that it's not specifics, it's about how people introduce and how they treat Agile. If you introduce and show the values, the principles wrong, and you promote the wrong use of Agile, it won't work. This is as simple as that. So in that case, I mean, for the big corporations, there is still a long path to learn for them.
Well, there's three key things here. There's a huge difference between can't, won't, and haven't. So can't is, it is impossible. I do not believe that. In a second, I do not believe that for a second. Some greater level, like the principles are very human. If your organization can't be human, what is it, a cyborg? Most is won't, we don't want to change it, or that's too much change for us to accept. You know, especially as a manager, it may mean my job disappears. And he would not, it's like asking, as they say in America, a turkey to vote for Christmas. You know, the idea being, no thanks for me. But that's can't and won't and haven't. A lot of people cannot imagine how to make that change. So it's not they can't make it, it's not they won't make it, it's they haven't got an idea about how to make it. And that's where people like us have to help. We don't have the answers, and God, if we copy the answer from someone else, it's probably wrong, but we can show some interesting paths people can take, and those interesting paths could lead them to a destination that would be better for them. It's like you know, we need to show them the lifeboats before they, you know, need to show them how to make the change, where they're going to go, and then people are more open-minded. You know, otherwise, like for me, a lot of people talk about Agile. Some people talk about it like it's the same old, same old. It's just a slight change to what you do now, and it isn't. It is a big change, right? But then some people talk with revolutionary language, and I'm never sure that's helpful. Like they're, you know, a revolutionary fighting the system and defeating and that's not useful language either. You know, we need to make sure people understand this is progressive. It's about progress. It's about thinking. It's about reflectiveness. It's different everywhere, but there are similar things everywhere as well. And so for one of the things I've been trying to talk about a lot over the last few years is just trying to distinguish between like what's a fundamental core that we should all really do, and what's a good thing that we may do, you know, and not confusing the two. Because my worry was always corporations getting those core fundamentals and getting them wrong, which they still do. But the other problem is then they treat all the good stuff like it's compulsory, and you end up with a very thick, badly done sludge. Not Scrum, sludge, right? And that sludge is neither like light or strong. It doesn't do anything and gets those organizations into trouble. So I think that nuance, that delicateness to what we do, understanding what is strong, understanding what is flexible, and not confusing the two, is a really important thing for us to try and communicate. Otherwise, you get things like, I don't know, but things like velocity, right? Yeah. So a company may try velocity and dislike it, right? That's fine. That's fine. It's not a core thing. It's a nice practice. It's not a core practice, right? They may try velocity and do it horribly wrong. Okay, that's fine. We can show them how to do it better, how to do it right. But then through a dislike of that one technique, throwing away all techniques and principles, I think that's a danger, and it's easily done. And so it's kind of like, I always think Scrum Master is a bit like one of those people who helps you with diets. Like in the UK, we have something called Weight Watchers, I think, which is, I've never done it, but suppose it's a club where you go to, if you're a bit fat like me, you go to the club every week, you talk to other people losing weight, you have your Weight Watcher person who helps you out with your numbers and how you do it, you weigh yourself, see where you're doing, and you wave goodbye and go back next week. I often think of Scrum Master a bit like that person facilitating that event. They're not losing the weight, are they? You need to lose the weight, but they're there to help you with tools, techniques, encouragement, support to coach you to lose the weight. And the reason those clubs exist is there are lots of people out there like me, who I'm afraid to say, even with the best will in the world, get a bit fat. And so same with organizations. They get a bit chunky. They get a bit chunky. Their processes get a bit heavy. They get a bit slow. Perfectly natural. We just need to have people who can help them sort of slim, help them improve, and help them get a bit healthier. That's really what it's all about, I think.
Also, I think that's it's a matter of generations also, because what I've been observing in also in our country is that people of like generation even older than me, I mean, more 40s or 50s, they are usually very resistant for any kind of changes. And however we call Scrum or Agile, it's a change for the organization level, for the company, for the culture, for the team, and any layer, it's a big change. So younger generation, they have already like naturally built in some sense of flexibility that is required for Agile. But for older generations, it's a big frightening because, as you said, they're afraid that okay, with this new stuff, if I won't adapt, they will fire me and find someone who is younger, better, and more adaptive to the new ways. And this is working in a wrong way. So instead of motivating people to learn something, to learn new stuff, they're trying to resist, trying to find some bad things, some minuses, some disadvantages, or even worse, they're like sabotaging the whole teamwork. And then all of a sudden you get a company head who's saying, well, you know, we tried Agile and our results was terribly bad, and we decided to come back to put someone on the top of the company who will be like guiding everything and saying what need to be done. This Agile stuff not working. And then you come into the perfect idea, just saying, okay, you were doing an Agile, but you were not being Agile. It's completely different ideas. So that's the case also for the generation part. And this should be, I guess, very essential, because people should be taught to be adapting. This is something that can be taught. I deeply believe that you can taught this.
This is really interesting because you've got me thinking about my own country's past. And I don't know, but I remember back when I was a child or a baby or before I was born, the UK was very unionized. So you would have people have jobs for life, heavy union control. A lot of businesses are owned by the government. And basically, back when I was a child, this was broken. So they say they privatized many businesses, jobs for life were gone. A lot of unions were broken, and this put the world into a state of uncertainty. And for like the 80s in the UK, there was lots of strife as there was clashes between this sort of modernization, privatization, and the classic older approach, right? And so I think back to British Telecom, actually, when I was working there were some people there who had been at that company so long, they had been there from the 70s, so from the old days, right? Now, interestingly, some of those people were quite open to Agile. Right? And it's interesting because they were BT people. They'd been their entire career, right? They were British Telecom people first. So over the years, they had changed jobs. Like one guy I know, he started off as climbing the poles, fitting phone lines on a pole, right? That was his job, right? And now he's a software developer. He's been like 20 years there. He's moved jobs. And so when we came to him with Agile, for him, it was just another thing to move on from. You know, like he's done all these other things. Now, okay, I get it. Now here's the next thing. Because he regarded himself as a BT person who did work for BT. And the new youngsters were fine, open-minded, taught in schools. In fact, my daughters, in their classrooms, you will see Socratic questions, you know. So why do we think that? What are we hoping to achieve? All these types of questions. So you get that there as well. That's brilliant, right? But in between, the middle is what was interesting. So not those old people who are BT people all the way through, or the youth who have been taught to be flexible. There was a frozen middle. People who were brought in as the future once with particular skills. And now those skills are obviously, they're not the latest thing. They now need to be upgraded. And they were the ones that felt vulnerable, I think, because they came in almost as the future, and now a new future's arrived. And I can understand that being very difficult. When you mentioned ages, that's what got me thinking about it, because they were all 30s to 40s, right? They were all 30s to 40s at the time. That was the age they were. They'd been there 10, 15 years. They'd learned. It's interesting to think about that. The older ones and the younger ones were coping, but them not so much. And it makes me think, because I'm in my early 40s. So what I desperately don't want to be is that person, but with Agile. Someone having a new idea and me going, oh, that's not proper, and being grumpy about it. I've got to try and keep my open-mindedness and regard it with curiosity, even though at the moment in the Agile space, there is some nonsense being spoken by a few different people. I've got to make sure that I approach that appropriately and go, okay, I may think that's nonsense, but just be warned, people used to think what I said was nonsense. So I've got to be a little bit careful with judging that. Do not judge yet ye be judged. I've got to be careful with that.
I see. Yeah, I think that's one of the cases. You founded AgileBear, I think back in 2004 or 2005, something like this.
Yeah, it's like 2006. I think it was 2006. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms where we're like Agile itself, after the manifesto, let's call it, it was very young. How was this decision? I mean, you talk about it briefly, but let's try to elaborate this. So you went out from your paid job, let's call it like this, in a big company, in a very developing industry as a software developer, and project man, and then you go and jumping off in the risk of creating an own company in industry and in the knowledge sharing, which is relatively new, and it takes a lot of uncertainty in it. How was this decision? And I do believe you never regret about this. But at the moment of creating, at the moment of creating this, I do believe that you were afraid of something that's pretty organic. How was this decision? How was this thing?
Well, there's three things to it. So I'd recently become a certified Scrum trainer with the Scrum Alliance. So that was one. Now there's millions of certificates, but that was the only really big certificate out there in Agile at that time. Right? It was hard to get, but luckily I had had a career that was almost perfect to get it. So again, the joke is now that CV wouldn't get me a coaching job. But at the time, it was one of the best CVs you could have. I've been an actual developer on a Scrum team. I've been an actual Scrum master. I've been an actual Agile coach for many years. This was like the perfect CV. So I got that certified Scrum trainer so I could train certified courses, like certified Scrum Master training. So that's a perfect little protective. I still do it to these days. I'm running one of those courses today. So I've been doing it for years. That gave me a tool, a way to distinguish myself and a way to generate revenue. I could run those courses for people. And so another colleague had offered me some courses. They said, look, would you do these like 10 or so courses for me for a client? So I had that opportunity out there to take it. Secondly, when British Telecom, they were on the downturn. So they were starting to stop investing in their Agile change, getting scared of it, getting a bit wobbly, taking money away from it. And so I could see that sort of declining. And I could see this opportunity rising. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to jump, I'll get paid more for this bit of work than I get paid any year. I've got to, it's not greed. I would love to say there was an element of new ideas, an element of the old job disappearing, but the main thing was I was getting really underpaid by that company compared to everyone else. And I kind of said, look, they pay me more. And they were kind of like, nah. And so I saw this opportunity. I thought, look, I've got to think of myself for a bit and take some money. And so I jumped and took the money. And that was really good, by the way. A lot of people, having purpose is important. Having a sense of direction is important. I can't say I'm really money motivated now. But back then, when I felt underpaid, it felt really important. And so having that opportunity to generate value for me off of my own work felt kind of good. Because when I was working for the company, even though I loved the company, it very much was my effort made them money. And now it's my effort making me value, money, success, whatever. It's my name. So for me, that was an important thing. Again, but I don't want to overplay it. I've talked about it before, but I don't want to overplay it. But that was another useful crutch. I could see the opportunity. If there was no opportunity there, maybe I would have stayed. But because it was there, I could make the jump. And very quickly, once I got out there, there was loads of opportunities. So I started advertising. I was one of the first people to do Google ads. That's how long ago it was. Google advertising heavily. No one else was. So I put those Google ads out to say, look, it's available. And there was actually an untapped appetite for that in a lot of places. So lots of things started coming in from weird and wonderful places. So I started doing that and developing that up and never stopped, really. Never stopped. Until COVID, I don't think I had like 4 weeks off in a row, ever, maybe until COVID. And then COVID came and everything stopped for a couple of months. So that was fine. But so that was quite odd, stopping traveling after so many years of traveling. But it's been so interesting ever since. So that's what really got me making the jump. But it took the combination of three things: new opportunity, value behind the opportunity, i.e. money, and the previous role disintegrating. I think those three things are what made the perfect storm for me to go.
I see. You are working for a multiple countries, so it's like outside the UK. You're traveling all over.
Yeah.
So there is only one more myth that was saying that there are like different people, different companies, different attitudes, different characters, different teams with different problems. There are a lot of differences. So what's your biggest challenge of adapting to these people? I mean, for example, like saying like this, in this part of the world where I'm located, like it's like more straight people, more of like fixed mind people, and they're like because of the country history, because of political history, and so on. So they're a whole ideology how a person in a team should behave, and it's kind of work. I mean, it's work, it's adapting. So in if we imagine something in Italy, something might not work because they have a complete different mentality, complete different attitude to the job. So and then you come as an agile coach, and you need to help people to open their potential, to work in their like full scale. And you have your own mentality, your own tricks and ideas. So how this all combines together? What's the magic sauce? Let's call it like.
Well, I just try and reach people. What I tend to find is there's more variation between a group of people than there is like in a country than there is between countries. So when people say, "Oh, they are all miserable," it turns out some are. You know, some are chatty, some are quiet, some are funny, some are boring. You know, it's true everywhere. The only issues I tend to have is some countries there seems to be very much wounded to this type of thing. So I mean, if they're like, "Oh, I've seen it before," you know, like you want us to decide, and that's harder. You have to get over that sort of wounding. Go, okay, it's not like what happened to you before. You know, so that's interesting. Also, just how people communicate. So I often try and use a lot of stories, and I'm always aware that some of the stories don't jump because people don't have the references. So as a classic example I use, you may not have this reference, Armin. There's a TV show when I was a kid called The A-Team, right? It was an American TV show, 4 guys, 4 mercenaries traveling the world. I mention it because it's funny, it's a TV show. A lot of people know about it. But in lots of countries around the world, it was shown under a different name. So I had like one country, it's called the Magnificent Seven. There's 4 of them in it, right? And so what I've learned to do is like, okay, sometimes I have to change the metaphor, change the explanation, change the story. Sometimes I have to explain the story, which actually some people like, by the way. If you have to explain odd English things, people who are not English find it quite interesting. They're like, oh, English people are odd, aren't they? Right? That's another one. So I just have to explain it or change it, or at least try and find how it matches up in their space. So what relevant things are in their world. So that's an interesting for me as a storyteller. You've got to find the right stories for the right culture and make sure they understand. One other thing is understand people's capacity to argue, their capacity to disagree. Like I've worked in a couple of nations where people seem to be quite loud and quite combative, right? It's just the style. They do it with each other, they'll do it with you. Okay. So you have to know, as an Englishman, don't really do combat. Like an English person, if you fed them something horrible, they would go, oh, that's quite nice. And what they mean is it's disgusting, right? Well, if you're in a country where they go, that's disgusting, you have to be able to handle that, right? And so it's just knowing that as well, knowing so some of the countries I've worked in, people have been generally a bit more quieter and reserved, and just knowing that. And in some countries they've been more overt and out and loud, and just knowing that as well. But in the end, as long as you can build a rapport with people, as long as you can build a relationship with them, in the end, I become Nigel. I'm not the Englishman, and they're not the Russian, or they're not the Israeli, or they're not the Irish one. They become humans as well. And it works okay out in the end. The bigger issue for me is normally corporate structure often overrushes national structure. So for instance, for years, I used to have people telling me, like, they have an Indian team, right? And they would tell me all these negative things about their Indian team, as if it's being Indian was the fault. But in fact, it wasn't at all. The difficulty was that team was in a subcontracting partner 2,000 miles away and treated like animals by their bosses in the UK. Of course, they're going to struggle to speak up. It's not their nation, it's not their nationality, it's the corporate system they live within is what's oppressed them. And so if we take that heat off, all of a sudden you see richly people come up, richly come to you, but it's understanding sometimes that what people think is culture, it is, but it's corporate culture, not necessarily national culture, and make sure people can distinguish between the two. Like when I was at British Telecom, when I've been working with government over here, it can be quite square, quite sort of humorless and a bit dry. That's okay. That's the way the corporation is. But what I would say is, okay, if we've got this corporate culture, not oppressing, but like a deodorant, underarm deodorant, like putting a smell on top of our national culture, why don't we put our own team smell, our own team perfume over the corporate culture? So we don't have to be like the rest of the corporation. We're the blue team. We can be what the blue team is. We can embrace our own internal culture and sort of try and put a stronger culture in place there. So for me, a lot of the variation over the world has been overblown a bit as a coach. But I would say that finding the right stories to tell and reaching people in their own language is best, by the way. I would say for me, there's still a lot of English people like me, or English speaking people touring the world, teaching people Agile in English, when I think it would be far nicer if it could be done in people's native language, in their native style. I think that'd be far more resonance for people. But I can't do that. I've got no foreign languages at all, I'm afraid to say. But I think something like that could be, and that's why I see people like yourself making great strides in organizations, being able to speak to people in their language, both on the ground, linguistically, but also as part of the culture that already exists there. I think that's really important.
Do you usually like researching the companies or requesting some information about the teams, about the management style? Or you like more like trying to do a field work, let's call it like this, to understand what's the current situation by talking to people? And I will explain why I'm asking this, because usually when I was contacted as an agile coach, usually it was like this: oh, we have this kind of problem, we have this kind of teams, and the advantages, disadvantage of certain person. And I'm usually saying, I don't need this. I don't need this. I need to know your hierarchy of the company, who is the big boss, how's the department, what's the product. And the next thing, I try to speak with the people. So just wanted to know about your approach. Do you doing some homework or going all fields?
Well, I like to get in there and speak to people, actually meet people on the ground, see what's really like, not what I'm told. Because I'm a storyteller. And I get told a lot of stories, and those stories that aren't necessarily my stories are true, theirs are not necessarily. So it's kind of like more. So I like to go in and find out what's actually going on. But also, my flaw as a human being is I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So I like to make people happy, keep people happy. And so if I go and do lots of research up front, I am concerned that I will then tailor my message. right? Which I don't want to do. I want to tell them authentically what this stuff is, right? That may make them unhappy. It may make them happy, but I want to tell them authentically what it is so they can judge it authentically. If I know too much about the organization, it is tempting for me to give a compelling story about it that doesn't necessarily tell the whole truth. It's not lying, but it sort of presents it in the best light. And that can be really nice if you're trying to sell something. But a lot of times I'm not trying to sell something. I'm trying to coach them. I'm trying to help them get better. And so I like to keep the unvarnished truth instead. So sometimes I find knowing a little bit less beforehand, if I'm doing training, for instance, not having that background is really powerful because I can tell them authentically what this stuff is. As a coach, then I go in and Gemba and walk around and find out what it actually is and not the story that's up front. See what I mean? So it's sort of two different styles depending on a trainer or a coach. I guess if I was doing some point consultancy, I would ask and get some background info. But there's a risk of that sort of stuff. You know, you don't know the full context. You fix one thing, could break another. So I think I'd prefer to be the other two styles, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. This is, I guess, two different approaches in terms of what you're doing. Coming back to the idea of this, to the situation of the COVID and all the world goes forcefully goes to online world. How this does affect it? Because many people do believe that coaching, training, or delivering value, changing people's mindset, this is something that is requires face-to-face, one-on-one conversations. And while delivering such value through a screen of the laptop, a lot of value is lost in the way. So what do you think about this, and how, in your opinion, we can go through this and adapt? And I do believe that the most powerful part of Agile is adaptation, how we can adapt to the new change. And we as Agile coach, being first of adapting to the new world, how this affected you?
So it's a lot. So I've had to change how I do everything, right, in terms of training, because I had a very set style of training. So I could perform, I could engage, and now I'm limited by the size of the screen, right? And so my concern is I can seem quite big on camera. What I mean by that is I was taught that in the theatre, right? So imagine you're a theatre performer, you're an actor in Shakespeare, right? You're performing for the back row. There's 1,000 people in this theatre. So it's to be or not to be. That is the question. You know, you're big because you need to reach the back row. If you're on a camera in a film, right, they can catch the smallest nuance. So you have to be much smaller. So you have to be very subtle, right? And my concern was, I'm quite a big character, and my concern was on this sort of thing. It could be a bit overbearing, you know, being this big on a Zoom call, right? Having said all that, like, these online things can be really dull, can be really boring online all the time. So I always find myself to add energy to the system. Now, here's the problem. People may be having a good time. I get good feedback. They're enjoying the experience. But for me, it's more one way. Like in real life, if I get a laugh or a smile or a response, I feed off that energy. Like, that's part of what makes me enjoy. I'm a human. I'm a people person. So I feed off their energy. Online on Zoom like this, it's very one way. So especially if their microphones are off, I'm feeding them and they're sort of going, but it's not, you know, I'm not getting energy back, and that makes it a lot more tiring. So I'm working a lot slower online than I was in real life because I just can't keep feeding this energy out. It drains me a lot. And coaching is interesting because I found coaching a bit harder like this. I like to build rapport, but some people find the dislocation of online allows them to open up more. So it's odd. It's like this gap between us here, they find that gap allows them to express things. That emotional gap allows them to express things they couldn't express before. Maybe because of dislocated emotions. I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to go there. But there seems to be some people seem to actually have an appetite for this more dislocated coaching. But that's coaching really like in the proper coaching stance, you know, helping them find their own answer. If you're trying to do something a little bit more collaborative, it's harder. You're trying to do something a bit more example based. So like one thing I like to do as a coach is just show by example. So rather than like tell or coach or consult or whatever, I like just to do it. Just like I will act the right way. I'll show the right behaviors, And people often pick that up osmotically. They pick it up just by seeing it. Oh, that's how it's done. That's what good Scrum Mastery looks like. Like you learn from your parents, don't you? They don't teach you how to be a parent, but you're learning all the time, watching them how to be a good or bad parent, watching their behaviors. It's something similar, and that's very hard for me to do online. I've had to do a lot of changing how I do things to make online work. What's going to be interesting for me is not being online, is not being offline. The new world is going to be this.
Yeah.
Where the combo of the two. And that's going to be more interesting, changing styles between approaches. I was just chatting today, Agile, great. Traditional, if it works for you, great. A lot of people seem to try and hybridize them, and they end up with something worse than both. It's less planning than a waterfall, but less feedback than an agile sludge, And so my concern is generally when we go back to like a multifaceted in-person, out-of-person world, is how to jump between those paradigms. And I haven't got an answer for that yet. I don't know how I'll feel about that, but I think that's something interesting that sort of changing styles and stances depending on the tech.
Yeah, I think it is one of the challenges that we have to face. I mean, after all this COVID stuff things ends up, and one of the also as a problem of conducting online training, anything doing online, is that first thing I 100% agree on not getting the energy back. So you're like hiring more, you work more, you do spread more energy than you get. And the second, which is what I want to say more important for me, is that when you do one-to-many coaching, I mean, you're alone and there's like, let's don't take big numbers, 7 people on the other screen. It's literally almost impossible to track all their facial expressions, all the body language, everything, and read everything. So when I talk to people, I generally trying to understand how the person gets the idea. It's like a match, you're like turning and if it's far up or not. On the online part, for example, even if the camera is turned up, it's very, very difficult, because I think it's a very thin line about going from coaching to lecturing. I mean, and this is very tricky. I think this is also a very red line that need not to be passed for this. And I do agree with you that we will going to face this hybridization of the online and offline trainings. And this is very interesting also for me how this is going to be, because there are a lot of students, a lot of people now who are like mostly heavily stuck with this online stuff, because it's opening opportunities, it's opening people who are not available for offline stuff, and they will be happy to continue with this. And everything will adapt, everything will change. So it's interesting to know in 1 year from now how it's going to be. Amazing.
So I did this workshop recently on collaboration tools. Like people, an organization I worked with wanted to talk about collaboration tools. And I think in their head, they were very much thinking like, okay, technology tools to help people collaborate, like Zoom and Miro, tools to help people collaborate. But when I actually looked into it, there was many other ways of looking at it. Alistair Coburn, one of the Agile Manifesto authors, did an article. I mentioned it recently, but it was like 20 years ago, on Agile tools. And he broke it up into 6 areas that I thought was fascinating. I'm going to read them now. Social, process, thinking, environmental, technology, and physical. Right? And I was fascinated by that, because we often think just like, oh, collaboration, we need a whiteboard. That's a physical tool. Now it's going online. Now it's a technology tool. Well, a whiteboard's just a board. Someone will draw a silly face on it. What we need is processes, human processes that we can run to get collaboration going on. We need to have social roles, like Scrum Mastery being the social role, helping people feel nurtured, engaged, showing the right behaviors, thinking methods, thinking tools to help people innovate and come up with ideas on an online setting. Environmental, you mentioned it a moment ago, but things like layout of an office, how's that going to work? We want to sit together? No, we don't. COVID. We're at home. What about if we're not at home and what's the middle ground? Having a good camera that's crucial. I don't know if you can see in my glasses, I've got a ring light behind me giving light to get enough light on me to work in this room. These are all things we have to consider. You know, a good microphone. I've got a blue mic that's really powerful. I really like it. Room's a bit echoey. These are all things I never thought I'd have to consider in the modern world of work. I was worried about, you know, value add and cost of delay. I wasn't worried about echo. You know, who needs to worry about echo? Well, we all need to worry about echo. And so those 6 angles from Coburn, I thought was really powerful in terms of helping us understand collaboration, which is one of the fundamental agile things, the heart of agility, and understanding when we go hybrid, when it goes half-half, we still need to keep all 6 of those factors in mind. Else what will happen is maybe at home, we've got the environment set up, but what about the office now? How's that going to work? What about, and I just think those aspects should not be overlooked.
Yeah, this is something we will definitely face, and this is a big challenge, I guess, for everyone. I mean, not only the coach, but it's really interesting to know how it's going to be. I know that you're writing a book. I do a small research, and I know that you are working on this. How you came to a decision to write the book? I mean, the idea is the following, because I think writing a book about Agile, about Scrum, it's pretty natural because you gather experience, you get a lot of interesting stories, and if you're working with different industries, you are like accumulate, and somehow you need, this is a proper way of sharing knowledge also. So how was this decision? I mean, you're drinking coffee in the morning and saying, let me write a book. And how this was?
So there's 3 stories here. The first story is I started writing this book probably 10 years ago. Right? There wasn't that much agile literature out there. So I started writing 10 years ago and I wrote it. Basically, when my daughter was born, my first daughter was born, I finished it 8 years ago, right? And I read it, I liked it, I put it to one side, my daughter got older and I didn't look back at it. I was a bit nervous about it because a lot of it was hypotheses that hadn't been tested. So it was a lot of, here are some ideas on scaling. Here are some ideas on changing your organization. But I had no evidence, I had no proof. They were genuinely ideas, and I was nervous about that. So it got put to one side, and then books came out that superseded it. There came out literature on scaling that superseded it, literature on organizational change that superseded it. So it died. I was a bit disappointed with this. Anyway, over the last few years, I've been experimenting with a range of ideas, again, a bit bigger than this call, a range of ideas on understanding context of Agile, understanding how organizations change. And what I discovered was my interest wasn't really the end pictures that people show you. Here is Spotify. Here is Safe. Here are these big, beautiful pictures. It wasn't the start. What was interesting to me was the change, the ing, changing, not changed. Here is the beautiful, handsome man with the muscles, not the pre-state. Here is a fat man with no muscles, but the line in between the two. How do you go from that body to that body? How do you go from that to that, the changing? And I realized most people don't talk about that. They talk about like, here's what it could look like. Here's what you were, but not about the process of ing, changing, scaling, growing an organization. So I thought, I'll write a book on that, the changing. And actually, one of the bits of advice someone gave me, they said, look, why don't you reference the old book? So the plan is to use the old book and then ing it. So change. So again, this is what I said 10 years ago. What's changed? What's changing about it? Is that advice still good? Has it got better? Is it valid? Is there some downsides to it? So sort of not just about changing organizations, growing organizations, scaling organizations, but the very nature of changing in a book. That's the plan. I've got my blog. I'm putting up their stuff when I write it. So last month, I think I wrote 12,500 words on something that is serious deep dive into sort of agile thinking. Whether it's readable, let alone read, that's another question. But I was trying to sort of start deep diving on this stuff and actually start putting some deep thinking into it. So that was good. But that's going to be my second book, because actually last month we published this. Myself, Jeff Watson, Paul Goddard, published Pun Mastery. Yeah. Agile jokes for agile folks. You said about collaborating online? We thought we'd experiment with it. We met every week for 2 hours for a few months, just basically writing bad agile jokes. And when I say bad ones, I mean OMG, terrible jokes. We call them dad jokes over here. Jokes that your father would make. They're so awful. All based around Agile. Do you know what? I'm unduly proud of that book. It was quite fun to make. It was quite fun to build. It was quite fun to work together. And so forever, my wonderful magnum opus, or whatever you call it, ing, is going to come, but it's coming. In the meantime, the short, sharp value-add release of Pun Mastery has come straight out. So second book. But anyway, yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. And again, it's hard. So I've got to make money. So books these days are very much vanity projects. You see how much Agile literature is out there. The first few Agile books sold well and made money because there was so little out there. These days, every person's writing a book. A friend of mine sent a picture of a book. I'm not going to name the book, but they sent me a picture of a book the other day they were sent. And the book's just drivel. It's literal drivel. It's embarrassing, but it's out there. And that person, those people can claim they're published authors. So my downside has always been a healthy cynicism of that. But trouble is, I'm also trying to do that. So I've got to be very careful. I don't want to put anything out that I feel is half-baked, but finding the time to do it is hard. And so for me, trying to have like a YouTube show, a book, and a family, and COVID, and do work, that's a lot of stuff going on in one life. So I'm going to see how the book goes. So my plan is I'm just going to give away everything on my blog. Everything I write is going to go on the blog for free. So if you want to read it for free, that's fine. At the end, when I reach a large amount of work, I'll publish it. And then if you want to pay money for it, you can do. But that way I don't feel like the old book, which I did very waterfally, built it up in secret behind the scenes and never revealed it. What a waste. With the new book, value add every week or every few months at least.
Yeah, I perfectly understand. First of all, like I'm in the same condition about family, job, channel trainings, and so on. So this is something that you need to balance, and this is really requires some skills, some agility also. As for the book, I will be waiting when it will be online. And first thing, I wanted to purchase the book that you were showing to me. I saw this advertisement in LinkedIn. So my next plan is to purchase and read about these jokes. I heard a lot from Nigel independent people about this. So this is one of my next goals. I will definitely update you about my opinion on that. And the second one, I do believe that when you will publish your book, you're gonna give me an autograph on it and send it to me.
Definitely autograph book. Yeah. I was going to read you a joke from it, but they're so bad. I don't think you really want to hear this. Oh my gosh, they're wonderful. That's a great joke. Let me find one for you. Here we go. No, that's a terrible joke. That's a terrible one. Terrible. No, okay, look, wait, you have to delete this bit. I need to find a better joke. Here we go. That's not funny. Oh, there we go. I've got a limerick for you. Let me find that limerick then. So you can cut this out. There we go. Limerick. I know the one I want to read.
So it's literally jokes based on the real experience.
Yeah. Well, just jokes like what's the difference between Godzilla and Jira? One is a gigantic monstrosity that destroys everything in its path, and the other one is a big lizard. So terrible. So wait, let me do this.
I desperately need this book. Right after this.
Let me find my
actually about the Jira.
Yeah, but anyway, there once was an eager young Scrum Master who wanted his team to go faster. He strapped on a rocket he found in his pocket. The team were last seen over Nebraska. So the idea is like, anyway, all terrible jokes. But it's out there. There it goes, pun mastery. It's the sort of jokes that only Agile people will laugh at. So if you want to entertain yourself, you read these jokes to people who don't do Agile, and they will sit there like this. My wife was going, this isn't funny. What does this even mean? Which made me laugh an awful lot.
This is one of my next goal. Okay, so it's time for my let's call it king question for what I'm asking actually at the end of all the talks, all the interviews. What is your advice for the younger generations, like literally people of 17, 18 years old, as I mentioned in Armenia, people starting to work very early, people who are like just stepping in the profession, and we're not actually start talking about agile coaching. We're talking about stepping in project management, Scrum, Agile itself, so the world of this magic. What will be your advice about not even how to start, because this can be different, and about how to maintain this constant learning and constant curiosity about developing, because of this Agile is about constant development. What will be your main advice?
I would say three things. First things first, I would just say be as broad as you can. Pick up lots. Don't specialize too early. You've got a whole life to go down a furrow. But you don't even know what you like yet. You're young, open-minded. Try lots of different things out. Try lots of different things. Some you'll like, some you'll hate. That is the worthwhile experience. Experiment with your learning. Find out what you like. Secondly, I would pair where you can. Pair with people that can really help you pick up again how you do it and how you don't do it. The best learning I've ever had in work is watching people do something badly or something I wouldn't do it and going, okay, I'm going to avoid that. So pair. The other way, so keep it broad, pair, and just be open-minded to all skills. So when I was at university, right, 18 to 21 years old, we had a course called Professional Skills, which was like professional skills, like how to work in a workplace. At the age of 19, this was the naffest, most boring course ever, completely pointless. Like we had vice presidents of banks telling us stories about the bank, right? Oh, so pointless. I want to learn how to program. I'll tell you what, that was one of the most important courses in real life. Having professional skills, learning how to navigate the professional workplace, and just being aware that being right doesn't mean you're right. Okay? There's a whole difference between knowing the right answer and having people accept the right answer. So being open-minded, being curious, listen, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, pay attention, be humble, it's okay. You know, you don't have to prove yourself today. Open-minded, curious, take on loads of ideas and pair with people, and then just see where it goes. See where it goes. You may love Scrum Master, you may hate it. You may want to be a developer, may want to be a tester, may want to get out of IT altogether and go into sales. That's all fine. I never would have predicted I would have ended here, ever. I would never have guessed as a child I'll be in this spot. This job didn't even exist when I started work. Okay, so don't plan out what you're going to do at 40 now. The job you're doing at 40 doesn't exist today. All right, just experiment, be open-minded, try things, pair, listen, and I think that will give you loads of a broad base of skills to decide what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, see, this is I think this is the most valuable experience and advice that the people of the younger generation can get from an experienced person from you for free. So I do believe they're going to follow this, because I perfectly aligned with your vision and I do value the same things. Thank you very much. It was very, very much interesting, even for me and people who will look to this talk. And I'm very appreciating that you found time in your tight schedule to share your experience. And I hope that in future we can collaborate even maybe outside the online world and do another session. So, but for now, I think this is the end of it. Thank you very much, Nigel. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
It's been great fun. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Take care. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This was the channel AgileSeeker. We're here talking about interesting stuff with interesting people. See you next time.